The wind howled across the New Mexico desert, kicking up red dust that stung Amos Granger's weathered face as he rode his old mare, Daisy, through the scrubland. His eyes, squinted against the late October sun, caught something unnatural in the distanza dark shape swaying against the gnarled branches of a lone cottonwood tree. His heart lurched, a cold fist tightening in his chest. He urged Daisy forward, her hooves crunching on the dry earth, and as he drew closer, the shape became clearer. It was a girl, no more than 16, her slight frame dangling from a rope tied high on the tree, her feet kicking weakly, her hands clawing at the noose around her neck. Amos's breath caught, his calloused fingers fumbling for the knife at his belt. "Hold on, darlin'," he whispered, his voice rough as gravel. "Just hold on." He dismounted in a hurry, his bad knee screaming as he hit the ground, but he didn't care. The girl's eyes, wide and dark, met his, and in them he saw a terror so raw it nearly knocked him back. She was Apache, her long black hair tangled, her clothisa faded denim jacket and jeans torn and dusty. Amos didn't think twice. He climbed a tree, his boots slipping on the bark, and sawed at the rope with his pocket knife, his hands trembling not from age, but from the weight of what he was seeing. The rope snapped, and the girl crumpled to the ground, gasping, her fingers scrabbling at the noose still tight around her throat. Amos dropped beside her, gently loosening the knot, his voice soft but steady. "You're all right now. You're all right." She coughed, her chest heaving, and Amos saw the raw red marks on her neck, the kind that told a story no one should have to live. He didn't ask questions, not yet. He just sat there in the dirt, his flannel shirt catching on the thorns of a nearby cholla cactus, and waited as her breathing slowed. The girl's name, he'd learn later, was Lena, but in that moment, she was just a kid who'd been through something no kid should. Amos reached into his saddlebag, pulling out a thermos of coffee he'd brewed that morning in his little ranch house kitchen, the kind with chipped mugs and a linoleum floor that hadn't been updated since the 70s. He poured some into the lid and held it out to her. "Here," he said, his voice gruff but kind. "It's not much, but it's warm." Lena's hands shook as she took it, her fingers brushing his, and she sipped slowly, the steam curling up into the crisp air. She didn't say thank you, not with words, but her eyes, still glassy with fear, held his for a moment, and that was enough. Amos noticed the way her shoulders hunched, like she was trying to make herself smaller, and it stirred something deep in him, a memory of his own daughter, long grown and gone, who used to sit that same way when the world felt too big. They sat there under the cottonwood, the desert stretching out around them, vast and quiet except for the occasional cry of a hawk. Amos didn't push her to talk. He knew better than to prod at fresh wounds. Instead, he pulled a worn bandana from his pocket and handed it to her. "For your face," he said, nodding at the dust and tears streaking her cheeks. She took it, her fingers hesitant, and wiped her eyes, leaving smudges that made her look even younger. "I'm Amos," he said finally, leaning back against the tree, his cowboy hat tipped back on his graying head. "Got a ranch a few miles east. Ain't much, but it's home." Lena nodded, clutching the thermos lid like it was a lifeline. "Lena," she whispered, her voice barely audible, like she wasn't sure she had the right to speak. Amos gave her a small smile, the kind that crinkled the corners of his eyes, and said, "Well, Lena, you're safe now. That's what matters." He didn't know her story, but he didn't need to. Not yet. All he knew was she needed someone, and he was there. The sun was dipping low, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, when Amos stood and offered her a hand. "Can't stay out here all night," he said. "Gets cold as heck when the sun goes down. My place ain't far. You can rest there, get some food." Lena hesitated, her eyes darting to the horizon, like she was weighing whether to trust him or bolt into the desert. Amos didn't push. He just stood there, his hand outstretched, letting her decide. Finally, she took it, her grip weak but determined, and he helped her to her feet. She was light as a bird, and he noticed the way she limped slightly, favoring her left ankle. He didn't comment on it, just led her to Daisy and helped her up behind him on the saddle. The ride back to his ranch was slow, the mare's steady gait rocking them through the twilight, and Lena's arms wrapped loosely around his waist, her hands trembling against his flannel. Amos didn't say much, just pointed out the silhouette of Shiprock in the distance and muttered something about how the stars were brighter out here than anywhere else. Lena didn't respond, but he felt her relax, just a little, against his back. His ranch house was a modest thing, a single-story adobe with a sagging porch and a wind chime that clinked softly in the breeze. Inside, it smelled of coffee and old wood, with a threadbare couch in the living room and a kitchen table covered in a checkered cloth. Amos set Lena up with a glass of water and a plate of cornbread he'd made the day before, warmed up in his ancient microwave. She ate slowly, her eyes fixed on the table, and Amos busied himself at the stove, heating up a can of chili. He didn't know what else to do but keep her fed, keep her warm. "Ain't gourmet," he said, setting a bowl in front of her, "but it'll stick to your ribs." Lena gave a small nod, her first real acknowledgement, and took a spoonful. They ate in silence for a while, the only sound the ticking of a clock on the wall, a gift from his late wife, Martha, who'd loved its loud, steady rhythm. Amos watched Lena out of the corner of his eye, noting the way her hands steadied as she ate, the way her shoulders began to loosen, just a fraction. After dinner, Lena spoke, her voice soft but clear. "Why'd you help me?" she asked, her eyes searching his face like she was looking for a catch. Amos leaned back in his chair, his fingers tracing the rim of his coffee mug. "Didn't seem like I had much choice," he said simply. "Saw you there and, well, I couldn't just ride on by." He paused, then added, "My daughter, Ellie, she was about your age when she went through a rough patch. Didn't know how to help her then. Maybe I'm making up for it now." Lena's eyes flickered with something curiosity maybe, or recognition, and she asked, "What happened to her?" Amos's smile was bittersweet. "She's all right now, lives in Albuquerque with her kids, but back then, she felt alone like nobody saw her. I reckon you know that feeling." Lena looked down, her fingers twisting the bandana he'd given her, and nodded. It was a small gesture, but it felt like a bridge, fragile but real, forming between them. Over the next few days, Lena stayed at the ranch. Amos didn't ask her to leave, and she didn't offer to go. He gave her the spare room, the one with a quilt Martha had made, and a window that looked out on the corral where Daisy grazed. Lena didn't talk much, but she started helping out small things, like washing dishes or feeding the chickens. Amos noticed the way she moved, cautious but deliberate, like she was testing the ground beneath her. One afternoon, as they sat on the porch with mugs of coffee, the air sharp with the smell of sagebrush, Lena started to open up. "I ran away," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "From the res. My mom, she's sick, and my uncle, he..." She trailed off, her fingers tightening around the mug. Amos didn't press, just nodded, letting her words hang in the air. "You don't have to tell me," he said. "But if you want to, I'm here." Lena's eyes met his, and for the first time, he saw a spark of trust, faint but growing. They fell into a rhythm, the kind of quiet companionship that doesn't need many words. Amos taught her how to mend a fence, his hands guiding hers as they twisted wire, and she showed him how to braid sweetgrass, her fingers quick and sure, despite the tremor that sometimes crept in. One evening, as they sat by the fire pit in the yard, the flames casting shadows on their faces, Lena told him more. Her mother had cancer, and the hospital bills were drowning them. Her uncle, who'd taken her in, had a temper fueled by whiskey, and Lena had fled after he'd raised a hand to her one too many times. "I didn't know where to go," she said, her voice breaking. I couldn't stay." Amos listened, his heart heavy, and when she finished, he reached out, his hand resting gently on hers. "You're stronger than you know, Lena," he said. "You're still here. That counts for something." She looked at him, tears brimming, and managed a small, shaky smile. The turning point came on a chilly November morning, just before Thanksgiving. Amos woke to find Lena gone, her bed neatly made, the quilt folded with care. His stomach dropped, fearing she'd run again, but then he saw her out by the corral, sitting cross-legged in the dirt, her head bowed. He approached slowly, his boots crunching on the frost-covered ground, and saw she was holding a small bundle of sage, whispering words he couldn't hear. When she looked up, her eyes were clear, resolute. "I need to go back," she said. "To my mom. I can't keep running." Amos nodded, his throat tight. He'd known this moment was coming, but it still hurt, like losing Ellie all over again. "All right," he said. "But you ain't going alone." He drove her to the reservation in his old pickup, the radio playing soft country tunes, the heater rattling. The drive was long, the desert stretching out endless and golden, and they talked about everything and nothing. Lena told him about her mother's laugh, how it used to fill their trailer, and Amos shared stories of Martha, how she'd hum hymns while baking pies. When they reached the reservation, Lena's mother, Clara, was waiting outside a small clinic, her face thin but bright. Lena ran to her, and Amos watched, his eyes stinging, as they embraced, their tears mixing in the cold air. Clara invited Amos inside, and over cups of instant coffee in a cramped kitchen, she thanked him, her voice trembling. "You gave me my girl back," she said, her hand clutching his. Amos shook his head. "She found her own way back," he said. "I just gave her a place to rest." Before he left, Lena pressed the braided sweetgrass into his hand, her fingers lingering on his. "For you," she said. "So you don't forget me." Amos smiled, his heart full. "Ain't no chance of that, darlin'." As he drove home, the sweetgrass tucked in his pocket, he thought about how small things a thermos of coffee, a quiet porch, a listening ear could change everything. He thought about Lena's courage, Clara's love, and the way kindness, even the simplest kind, could ripple out, touching lives in ways you never expected. Back at the ranch, Amos sat on the porch, the wind chimes singing softly, and looked out at the stars. They were brighter out here, just like he'd told Lena, and tonight they felt like a promise. He'd been alone for so long, since Martha passed, since Ellie moved away, but now he felt something new, hope, maybe, or faith that the world still had good in it. He thought of Lena, back with her mother, and he prayed they'd be all right. He thought of the cottonwood tree, and how he'd never ride by it again without remembering her eyes, her strength. And he thought about all the people out there, carrying their own burdens, waiting for a small act of kindness to light their way. So, to anyone listening, I ask you this: has kindness ever changed your life? Maybe it was a stranger's smile, a warm meal, or a hand outstretched when you needed it most. Share your story in the comments below. Let's remind each other that even in the darkest moments, kindness can change everything. This story is a work of fiction or dramatized for entertainment purposes. While it may be inspired by real human emotions and events, all characters, names, and situations are either entirely fictional or modified for storytelling. This content fully complies with YouTube's community guidelines and is intended to inspire, not mislead.